In an era where media institutions are increasingly being shaped by powerful corporate interests, the act of a journalist standing up against such forces can be both rare and monumental. The situation that unfolded at the Los Angeles Times serves as a striking example of this dynamic. The recent resignation of Harry Litman, a senior legal correspondent and contributor at the newspaper, sent shockwaves through the media industry, marking a pivotal moment in the ongoing battle between independent journalism and corporate media. Harry Litman, known for his sharp legal analysis and his passion for defending democratic values, had been a key figure at the LA Times for many years. He was a veteran journalist with a wealth of experience, having served as a clerk for 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices, worked as a U.S. attorney, and even as a line prosecutor. However, in a dramatic turn of events, Litman chose to resign from the LA Times after becoming disillusioned with the newspaper's leadership, which he saw as increasingly sympathetic to right-wing ideologies and willing to compromise journalistic integrity for political expediency. This decision is emblematic of a much larger trend that we are seeing in American media, where journalists are increasingly seeking alternative platforms that prioritize truth over political balance, especially in an era dominated by former President Donald Trump's influence on the media. Litman's decision was not just a personal choice, but a public statement against what he saw as the compromising of democracy itself. In this video, we will analyze the events leading to his resignation, the broader implications for journalism, and how independent media is emerging as a critical alternative to corporate-controlled news outlets. Harry Litman's career and background. To understand the magnitude of Litman's resignation, we must first explore his impressive career. Harry Litman was not just any journalist. He was an individual whose professional background and experience gave him a unique perspective on the current state of American democracy. Litman had worked in both government and law, including clerking for 2 U.S. Supreme Court justices and serving as a U.S. attorney. His expertise in constitutional law and his deep understanding of the justice system allowed him to contribute valuable insights into the political landscape, particularly during the Trump administration. Before his resignation, Litman had been writing op-eds and legal analysis for the LA Times for over 15 years, covering high-profile trials and constitutional matters. His work was widely respected, with a reputation for clear-eyed analysis and a commitment to truth. He had a loyal following among readers who appreciated his ability to break down complex legal issues and political events in a way that was accessible to the public. However, in recent years, Litman had become increasingly disillusioned with the direction the LA Times was taking under its billionaire owner. The editorial independence of the newspaper, which had once prided itself on standing up for the truth and presenting a balanced view of the world, seemed to be eroding. Litman began to feel that the media outlet was no longer prioritizing truth and journalistic integrity, but instead was pandering to political forces that threatened to undermine democracy. The LA Times and its pro-Trump shift. The turning point for Litman came during the 2020 presidential election cycle when the LA Times faced pressure from its billionaire owner to adjust its editorial stance. Despite the editorial board's endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris, the owner intervened and blocked the endorsement. This marked the beginning of a series of decisions by the paper's leadership that Litman saw as a capitulation to the right-wing forces that were increasingly dictating the national conversation. The LA Times was not alone in this struggle. Throughout the Trump era, many traditional news outlets found themselves caught between the need to maintain their readership and the pressure to appease political forces, including the former president himself. Litman observed how the LA Times, along with other prominent media organizations such as The Washington Post, seemed to cower in the face of Trump's attacks on the press. Rather than standing firm in defense of journalistic principles, these outlets appeared to bend to the will of a president who openly threatened to undermine the media's credibility. As Trump's rhetoric grew more hostile toward the press, it became apparent to Litman that the LA Times, in particular, was seeking to maintain a stance of balance in its coverage. The owner's comments on Fox News about striving for fairness and balance seemed to signal a shift away from holding political figures accountable, especially when it came to Trump and his administration's repeated assaults on democratic norms. Litman believed that such balance was no longer appropriate in the face of lies and disinformation. In his view, it was not about balancing the truth with falsehoods, but about exposing the dangers posed by Trump's rhetoric and policies. The final straw for Litman came when the LA Times seemed to be increasingly sympathetic to Trump's positions, even as he continued to undermine the rule of law and threaten democracy. The newspaper's willingness to compromise on its editorial stance in favor of appeasing political powers signaled to Litman that the values he had once cherished at the paper no longer aligned with his personal principles. Harry Litman's resignation, a courageous stand. On the heels of these revelations, Harry Litman made the bold decision to publicly resign from the LA Times. His departure was a stark rejection of the newspaper's new direction and a statement against the broader trend in corporate media that had seen journalistic integrity sacrificed at the altar of political expediency. Litman's resignation was not just a personal statement, but also a clarion call for other journalists and media professionals to consider whether they were willing to compromise their principles in exchange for maintaining their positions at large corporate outlets. In a heartfelt statement, Litman explained that while he had greatly enjoyed his time at the LA Times, he could no longer work for an institution that was willing to abandon its commitment to the truth. He described how, over the past few months, he had witnessed the erosion of journalistic standards as the paper increasingly bowed to political pressures from its billionaire owner and other corporate forces. This was not just about disagreeing with editorial decisions, but about the very survival of the press as a force for truth and accountability in society. Litman's resignation sent ripples through the media world, as it highlighted the growing influence of wealthy individuals who use their media holdings to promote their own political agendas. The LA Times, once a respected voice for the truth, was now a casualty of the corporate takeover of American journalism, where profit motives often take precedence over the public interest. The rise of independent media. In the wake of Litman's resignation, the conversation turned to the role of independent media in the modern political landscape. As traditional news outlets continue to be shaped by corporate interests, independent media platforms have become a powerful alternative for those seeking uncensored, unbiased news. Litman's decision to leave the LA Times and turn to independent platforms like his own Substack and YouTube channel, Talking Feds, reflects a broader trend that is reshaping the media landscape. The rise of independent media offers journalists like Litman the opportunity to speak freely without fear of corporate interference or political pressures. With platforms like Substack, YouTube, and other social media outlets, journalists can now build their own brands and cultivate direct relationships with their audiences. This shift has allowed for a diversification of voices in the media landscape, as more and more people seek alternatives to the corporate-controlled news that has become increasingly untrustworthy. Litman's work on his Substack and YouTube channel has seen significant growth, with an expanding audience that values his legal insights and commentary on the state of American democracy. Independent media provides a space where journalists can tell the truth without worrying about losing their job due to corporate censorship or political pressure. This trend is likely to continue as more people turn to independent platforms for their news and analysis. The resignation of Harry Litman from the LA Times is a watershed moment in the ongoing battle for the soul of American journalism. Litman's courageous decision to walk away from a prestigious position at a major media outlet underscores the growing tension between independent journalism and corporate interests. As traditional media outlets like the LA Times continue to succumb to political pressures and financial imperatives, independent platforms are emerging as crucial alternatives for those who seek truth and accountability. In the face of rising disinformation and political manipulation, the media must prioritize the preservation of democratic values and the free flow of information. Litman's resignation is a reminder that journalists must stand firm in their commitment to the truth, even when it means taking a difficult and public stand. It is also a call to action for all of us to support independent media and ensure that democracy is not undermined by the forces of corporate control and political corruption. As Litman builds his own platform and continues to speak truth to power, it is clear that the future of journalism lies in the hands of those who refuse to be silenced. Independent media is not just an alternative to corporate news. It is a necessary pillar of a functioning democracy. Litman's resignation is a brave step in that direction, and it serves as an inspiration for all journalists who are willing to stand up for the truth, no matter the cost.